any second now, and there you are getting a great view of Crew-9 inside Dragon Freedom as it returns back to Earth. We are awaiting the drogue deploys. This view coming from the WB-57 high altitude plane, and there you see it on your screen, drogue deployment.
Drogue descent rate nominal.
You can hear the crowd here.
Visual on 2 healthy drogues.
The crowd here very excited as Dragon Freedom continues to make its way back to planet Earth.
Next up, we'll stand by for the main deployment of the parachutes. The mains are quite a bit larger. You'll be able to notice the difference on your screen once they deploy, and they continue to ensure that the Dragon spacecraft slows down even further. As we mentioned, Freedom will be traveling 16 miles per hour when it splashes down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, here at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. And there we go.
We have visual on 4 healthy mains.
That view was from inside.
Freedom copy.
That view was from inside one of the buckets where the parachutes are located. So we see a great view there of the reefing on those parachutes. And as those main parachutes begin to inflate fully, 4 beautiful, healthy mains. Now awaiting visuals of Splashdown.
Freedom.
We'll start to hear Commander Nick Hague.
Copy 1000.
As we heard right there, Commander Nick Hague will be calling out the altitude of the Dragon capsule from here on out. Landing in water is simpler and provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. You can see those parachutes continuing to slow the Dragon capsule down.
And if you're just joining us, you're looking at
800 meters.
a live view of Crew-9 just minutes away from splashing down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Splashdown 2 minutes from now at 2:57 p.m. Pacific. We do have 4 healthy mains really doing the job there. Just breathtaking views of a calm, glass-like ocean off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Crew-9 just minutes away from splashing down.
This is really such an incredible shot.
Copy 600.
That was a live view from our recovery vessel, Megan, which is stationed a couple miles away from the splashdown site. We can see the crew there using their restraints as resting places for their arms. They were just in space moments ago, so their arms were able to float freely.
400 meters.
This is a gorgeous bluebird day here that we have for the splashdown of Crew-9. It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour, and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown.
200.
Copy 200 meters. Brace for splashdown.
As you can see there on your screen, continuing to monitor progress of the Dragon spacecraft. And we're going to stand by for splashdown, located in the Gulf of America, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
And splashdown. Crew-9 back on Earth.
And SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
It is an amazing what a ride. I see a capsule full of grins ear to ear.
And And as you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation of splashdown. Dragon Freedom has returned home, and NASA astronauts.
System safety verifications are in progress. We'll report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Understand. We're in section 2, 4.800 landing response. And looking for your words on if it is necessary.
In the distance, we can see the recovery vessel making its way.
Copy, you're in section 2 for the environmental assessment in 4.800. That is not necessary today.
Understand. Raise and advise.
So we will continue to have communications between the Corps and Nick Hague, the commander of Crew Dragon Freedom, which just splashed down 2 minutes ago off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Dragon Freedom has returned home with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunoff. They're back on Earth after approximately 17 hours of a return journey from space.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team have been waiting for Dragon's splashdown, and they will now make their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about 30 minutes or so to make their way to
SpaceX Freedom. First server in Stable 1.
Copy, Stable 1. We see the same.
It's going to take about 30 minutes for the recovery team to make their way over to Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander, who are still seated and secured inside that Dragon spacecraft there on your screen. Incredible views there of that thermal protection system, or TPS. That Dragon capsule was pristine, white color before it departed the station, and we can see how the reentry phase, the thermal protection system did its job. Now, if you're wondering what that hole, that bucket area is, that is underneath the side hatch. That is where the main parachutes were stored. So when we saw the Dragon capsule docked at station, it looked very different. The panel that protects and covers the main parachutes, that was still intact, as well as the panels that enclose where the drogue parachutes are located. We can see those fast
Freedom.
boats.
SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in the next few minutes.
Freedom copies.
We can see those fast boats. We weren't kidding when we said they were fast. While it does take about 30 minutes for the main recovery vessel to make its way over to the capsule, these fast boats will be doing a couple of things simultaneously. A couple of them are going to be working to retrieve the parachutes that you see in the background there of this drone shot. Those parachutes will be retrieved from the ocean surface. We want to make sure we are able to pull those out. The recovery vessel there closest to the spacecraft is going to be performing some safety checks. We can see there they're using an instrument that is basically working to detect if there are any hypergolic vapors or fumes that are still residing in and or around the Draco thruster nozzles or outlets. The hypergolic fuel, which is necessary for on-orbit burns to maneuver the spacecraft. Unfortunately, those hypergolics are unable to be breathed. They are toxic, and so this team here is doing those initial safety checks to make sure that it is safe for the rest of the recovery team to approach the spacecraft. They're also checking to make sure that any residuals from the pyros are safe and are not going to cause any issues. We can see the team working their way around the spacecraft to do these these sniff tests on all of those Draco thrusters.
And as we continue to await the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunoff inside, Dragon has autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown. We are continuing to see Dragon in what is known as stable 1 configuration. That's kind of the ideal configuration following splashdown. It's upright, and the Dragon capsule's in the right configuration for it to be hoisted into the recovery vessel Megan, which you do see a little ways off in your screen approaching. Dragon will continue to remain live on air with you through that recovery process, all the way through the point where the crew is extracted from the Dragon spacecraft. Now, if you are just joining us, the mission has gone smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon.
Approximately 17 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn. This placed the Dragon spacecraft on a trajectory toward Tallahassee, Florida. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. We're now going to follow the
Freedom, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
And so what we did just hear there was communications that those hypergol checks were complete. They didn't find any of that upon those checks, so we'll continue to move through the timeline. Next up is a process called rigging, which you see happening right now on your screen. This is when a SpaceX recovery personnel actually works to climb aboard the capsule and work through procedures ahead of lifting onto the nest of the recovery vessel Megan. We heard it's going to be about 25 minutes or so until that lift actually takes place.
Okay, Freedom, the next call will be from the SpaceX flight surgeon on Dragon to Ground Private.
Understand. Thank you.
callouts there indicating that the crew will have the opportunity to do a quick check-in with the SpaceX flight surgeon. This is standard procedure for every Dragon spacecraft when it returns to Earth. It's just an initial check-in, make sure everybody is doing okay. They will also have another check-in with the flight surgeon once they are on board that recovery vessel that you see there in the background.
Copy that, Freedom. Have you loud and clear as well, and Dragon to Ground is no longer private.
Understand. Thank you.
As we saw there on the screen, we have a couple of fast boats in the recovery fleet that have quickly moved into the splashdown location. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. The two fast boats have very specific roles. Excuse me. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection, as we saw. They do this for spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of those rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first one that makes the initial approach to the Dragon spacecraft. As we saw a little bit earlier, we were also able to see one of the recovery team members get on a jet ski to help gather up the parachutes that were automatically detached from the Dragon spacecraft upon splashdown.
And it will take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. Once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted, and as you see, they are preparing for that to take place at this point. As part of the preparation for this.
And okay, I think the crew
here on your screen, we can see dolphins actually, who want to come and play with Dragon. Now, one of the fast boats there in place, working to assist the recovery team member. It's incredible. I just love these views. We really see them even better in daytime, but just seeing the recovery team work in tandem to step through each step, to step through each operation. That is, again, this is just one more step as we continue to work recovery operations for Dragon Freedom, and we anticipate the lift of the Dragon capsule to occur here in just a few minutes. Now, once all of the rigging is on the capsule and it's hooked up to the recovery vessel, we will see the hydraulic arm, which is that kind of like bridge-like structure there at the aft end of the recovery vessel. We'll see that articulate backwards, and that's a good sign that we're getting even closer to pulling the capsule out of the water. Is basically a basket. We call it the nest, Dragon nest, where that's where the capsule will be placed in order for it to be translated to the forward end of the vessel and for the astronauts to egress.
And before that does take place, we'll have potentially views of the rigger go ahead and jump off of the spacecraft there.
That typically occurs when the spacecraft is a little bit closer to the recovery vessel, and we usually get a really...
Megan, but that's actually after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur, who flew on Crew-9 a couple of years ago. We're getting some views now from actually inside the boat.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This view is straight down the recovery vessel. That platform that was closest to the camera, that is the egress platform.
Freedom, rigging is almost complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Great news there from SpaceX Core. So about 5 minutes left until we see Dragon Freedom get lifted out of the water. That hydraulic arm, as I said before, out of the water and onto our recovery vessel, Megan.
So once securely on...
Welcome aboard, the
Splashdown at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time, and we can now see...
Thanks, Nick. It's been an honor.
This is a pretty exciting moment coming up. We are working to open the side hatch. One thing that may not be obvious from, just looking at the spacecraft here is that this side hatch that we're about to open, the Dragon spacecraft.
Down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The crew is now on board the recovery vessel Megan, and the hatch is open. Next major milestone that we'll see is when the crew will actually egress or exit the spacecraft. But before that, they'll continue to, the recovery personnel rather, will continue to install that protective area around the hatch and then remove the footrests. So we're a couple minutes away from seeing the crew egress, but not
grins. Now, generally speaking,
and there we do see Crew-9, some happy waves, smiles all around back on Earth.
Generally speaking, we have the individuals in the two center seats of the spacecraft exit first. You might hear us refer to this as the exit process as egress. It's just another term for exiting the spacecraft. Generally speaking, we most of the time have the two center seats egress first, as it makes moving around inside the capsule a little bit easier. We can see the tablets that were previously located on the upper leg of the crew members. We can see those being handed out to the recovery team. Those were taken off prior to the entry phase, to spacecraft reentry. Those had to be stored and secured prior to dynamic operations.
looks like we are starting to.
We can see folks on board clapping as our first crew member.
And that is NASA astronaut Nick Hague, commander of Crew-9, now out of Crew Dragon Freedom. Some smiles, thumbs up, and a wave. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that is one happy camper, that's for sure. As we said before, it is standard procedure for all of our long-duration crew members to receive assistance upon egressing.
Next up out of the capsule, we expect Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. His first space flight. Spent 171 days in space alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague.
Looks like we're getting some cheers and clapping on board as Alexander is slid down the little ramp and placed into the mobility aid. Once again, big smile.
Now, the two crew members remaining in Dragon are NASA astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore. They completed 286 days in space.
One of the remaining footrests being removed from the Dragon spacecraft. As I said before, for those of you that have just recently joined, the Dragon had an on-time splashdown. Looks like we're getting our next crew member here. That is none other than Sunny Williams. Big smile, big waves. She, like her other crew members, now will be assisted onto the mobility aid.
There we have it, some waves, some thumbs up, and some smiles.
Definitely seems to be a theme among all recovery operations.
Side Dragon in seat 4. We're getting some views of him now as he egresses or exits the spacecraft.
Once again, some elation and cheers there from Butch Wilmore. As we mentioned before, returning to Earth from coming from a microgravity environment.